There is one drink that millions of people over 50 consume every single morning without thinking twice. For some people, it may be helping their metabolism wake up, supporting better insulin response, and protecting the body from dangerous blood sugar swings. But for others, that same drink may be doing the exact opposite. It may be raising stress hormones, increasing glucose release from the liver, weakening insulin sensitivity, and turning what should be a simple morning habit into a hidden blood sugar problem. And the most surprising part is this: the problem is usually not the coffee itself. The problem is the type of coffee, how it is prepared, and what goes inside the cup before you drink it. After 50, your body does not process sugar the same way it did when you were younger. Muscle mass often decreases. The liver may become more resistant to insulin. The pancreas may have to work harder to produce enough insulin. And even small daily habits can make a much bigger difference than most people realize. That is why coffee becomes so important. Because coffee is not just caffeine. Inside coffee beans, there are powerful plant compounds called polyphenols, especially one called chlorogenic acid. This compound has been studied for its potential to support healthier glucose metabolism, reduce glucose absorption, improve insulin sensitivity, and help the body handle sugar more efficiently. In simple words, chlorogenic acid may help your body need less effort to move sugar out of the blood and into the cells where it belongs. And that is exactly what matters when we talk about insulin. Insulin is like the key that opens the door of your cells. When insulin works well, glucose leaves the bloodstream and enters the muscles, brain, and tissues to be used as energy. But when insulin stops working properly, the body needs more and more of it to do the same job. This is called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is one of the main drivers behind type 2 diabetes, belly fat, fatigue after meals, cravings, high fasting glucose, and stubborn blood sugar numbers that do not improve even when a person feels they are eating healthy. So today, I want to show you 4 types of coffee that may help your insulin work better after 50. Not magic coffee. Not a cure. Not something that replaces medication, medical treatment, or the advice of your doctor. But 4 smarter ways to drink coffee that may support insulin sensitivity, reduce unnecessary blood sugar stress, and help you turn a daily habit into something that works in your favor instead of against you. And make sure you stay until the end, because the last coffee on this list is the one most people have never tried, but it contains one of the highest concentrations of the compound most closely linked to coffee's metabolic benefits. I'm Dr. Michael Carter, and before we go further, remember, this video is for educational purposes only. If you have diabetes, prediabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney problems, or if you take medication to control blood sugar, always speak with your doctor before making changes to your routine. Now let's begin with the first coffee. The first coffee that may help your insulin work better after 50 is plain black coffee, especially light or medium roast coffee prepared without sugar. This sounds simple, maybe even too simple, but this is where many people make the biggest mistake. They think they are drinking coffee, but what they are really drinking is dessert in a cup. A little sugar, a flavored creamer, a caramel syrup, a sweetened milk, a whipped topping, maybe a healthy honey or brown sugar because it sounds more natural. But to your blood sugar, sugar is still sugar. When you add fast-absorbing sugar into hot coffee with no fiber, no protein, and no real buffer, you create a drink that can enter your system quickly and push glucose upward. And then people blame the coffee. But the coffee was not the problem. The sugar was. Plain black coffee, on the other hand, is very different. When prepared without sugar, without sweetened creamers, and without flavored syrups, coffee becomes one of the richest daily sources of chlorogenic acid in the modern diet. This compound matters because it may support insulin in several ways. First, chlorogenic acid may help reduce the amount of glucose released by the liver. This is especially important for people who wake up with high fasting blood sugar. Many people over 50 say, "Doctor, I didn't eat anything during the night. Why is my blood sugar high in the morning?" One reason is that the liver can release stored glucose while you sleep, especially when insulin resistance is present. Your body may act as if it needs more sugar in the blood, even when it does not. That is why some people wake up with high glucose even before breakfast. Chlorogenic acid has been studied for its potential role in reducing this hepatic glucose production, which means it may help the liver release less sugar into the bloodstream. Second, coffee polyphenols may support better insulin sensitivity in muscle cells. This is extremely important after 50 because muscle is one of the main places where glucose should go after you eat. When your muscles are more sensitive to insulin, they respond better. They open the door more easily. Glucose leaves the blood more efficiently. But when muscle cells become resistant, glucose stays in the bloodstream longer, insulin stays elevated, and the pancreas has to work harder. Over time, this becomes a dangerous cycle. More insulin, more resistance, more belly fat, more cravings, more fatigue, more inflammation, and eventually, higher risk of type 2 diabetes complications. The third reason black coffee can be helpful is that it may influence hormones involved in appetite and glucose control, including incretin hormones that help the body respond better after meals. This does not mean coffee acts like medication. It does not. But it does mean coffee is not just a stimulant. It is a biologically active drink that can interact with several systems involved in blood sugar and insulin. However, there is one key detail most people miss. The roast matters. Dark roast coffee may taste stronger, but stronger taste does not mean stronger metabolic benefit. In fact, the longer and darker the bean is roasted, the more chlorogenic acid may be degraded by heat. So if your goal is to support insulin sensitivity and maximize the natural compounds in coffee, light roast or medium roast is usually a better choice than very dark roast. This is where many people get confused. They think dark coffee is healthier because it tastes more intense. But for chlorogenic acid, lighter roasting may preserve more of the compound you actually want. So the practical rule is simple. Choose plain black coffee, preferably light or medium roast, prepared as filtered coffee, drip coffee, or pour-over coffee. Do not add sugar. Do not add flavored syrups. Do not add sweetened creamers. If you need flavor, later in this video, I will show you better options that do not sabotage your blood sugar. For many people after 50, 1 to 3 cups a day may fit well into a healthy routine, depending on caffeine tolerance, blood pressure, sleep quality, anxiety levels, and medical conditions. But if coffee makes your heart race, makes you shaky, raises your blood pressure, worsens reflux, or affects your sleep, then the second coffee on this list may be even better for you, because the next coffee gives you many of the same beneficial compounds, but without the caffeine problem. And for some people with insulin resistance, that small change can make a big difference. The second coffee that may help your insulin work better after 50 is decaffeinated coffee. And this one is especially important for people who say things like, "Coffee makes me nervous. Coffee makes my heart race. My blood pressure goes up after coffee. My glucose seems higher after my morning cup." Or, "I love coffee, but I feel worse after drinking it." If that sounds familiar, you need to understand something very important. Coffee has 2 different stories happening at the same time. One story comes from the beneficial compounds in the coffee bean, especially polyphenols like chlorogenic acid. These compounds may support insulin sensitivity, glucose metabolism, and healthier blood sugar control over time. But the other story comes from caffeine, and caffeine does not affect everyone the same way. For some people, especially regular coffee drinkers who tolerate caffeine well, coffee may fit perfectly into a healthy routine. But for others, especially after 50, caffeine can temporarily activate the stress response. It can stimulate the nervous system. It can increase adrenaline. It can increase cortisol. And when cortisol rises, the liver may release more glucose into the bloodstream. This is not a defect in the body. It is a survival mechanism. Your body thinks, "We may need energy. Release glucose." The problem is that in someone with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, that extra glucose may not move into the cells efficiently. So instead of being used smoothly as energy, it stays in the bloodstream longer. That is why some people drink regular coffee and notice their blood sugar goes up even though they did not eat anything sweet. They think, "How can coffee raise my sugar if it has no sugar?" The answer is, sometimes it is not the sugar inside the cup. It is the hormonal reaction caused by caffeine. And this is where decaffeinated coffee becomes powerful, because decaffeinated coffee still contains many of the beneficial compounds found in coffee, but with most of the caffeine removed. That means you may still get chlorogenic acid and other polyphenols, but with less stimulation of the nervous system. For people who are sensitive to caffeine, this can be the difference between a coffee that stresses the body and a coffee that supports the body. Think of it like this. Regular coffee can be like pressing the accelerator and the brake at the same time. The polyphenols may be helping insulin sensitivity over time, but the caffeine may be temporarily pushing stress hormones up. For some people, the beneficial side wins. For others, the stress side wins. Decaffeinated coffee removes much of that conflict. It allows the useful compounds in coffee to work with less interference from caffeine. And this matters even more after 50 because your body may become more sensitive to sleep disruption, blood pressure changes, and stress hormones. A younger person may drink coffee at 5 p.m. and sleep normally, but after 50, that same habit may reduce deep sleep, increase nighttime awakenings, and indirectly worsen insulin resistance the next day. Because sleep and insulin are deeply connected. One bad night of sleep can make your body temporarily more insulin resistant. So if regular coffee affects your sleep, even if you drink it in the afternoon, it may be quietly harming your glucose control the next morning. That is why decaffeinated coffee is not just coffee for people who cannot handle caffeine. For many adults over 50, decaf can be a metabolic strategy, especially if you already have high fasting glucose, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety, palpitations, or poor sleep. Now, there is one mistake many people make with decaf. They switch to decaf, but they keep the same sugar, sweetened creamer, flavored syrup, or condensed milk. That defeats the whole purpose. A decaf coffee with sugar is still a sugar delivery system. A decaf coffee with caramel syrup is still a dessert. A decaf coffee with sweetened creamer can still trigger a glucose spike. So the rule is simple. Decaffeinated coffee only becomes helpful when it is unsweetened or prepared with diabetic-friendly additions. And this is where many people can start testing their own body. If you have diabetes or insulin resistance and you use a glucose meter or continuous glucose monitor, compare your response. One morning, drink regular black coffee. Another morning, drink decaf black coffee. Do this on similar days without changing breakfast dramatically, and watch what happens. Some people notice almost no difference. Others notice that decaf keeps them much more stable. Your body gives clues. Do not ignore them. The best time to use decaf is usually in the afternoon or evening, when caffeine would be more likely to affect sleep. But some people may do better using decaf as their main morning coffee too, especially if they are very sensitive to caffeine. Now let's make this practical. Choose a high-quality decaffeinated coffee, preferably light or medium roast if possible. Avoid instant decaf loaded with additives. Avoid flavored decaf unless it clearly has no sugar and no artificial syrup. Prepare it as filtered coffee, drip coffee, or pour over. Drink it plain, or with cinnamon, unsweetened almond milk, or a few drops of pure vanilla extract. And never assume that decaf means healthy if the coffee drink comes from a chain store and has whipped cream, syrup, and sweetened milk. A large flavored decaf latte can still contain more sugar than a dessert. That is not a coffee habit. That is a blood sugar trap. So the second coffee is decaffeinated coffee because it may allow people over 50 to receive the polyphenol benefits of coffee without the same caffeine-related stress response. Now the third coffee is where things get even more interesting because we are going to combine coffee with a spice that has been studied for its relationship with insulin sensitivity. And this combination is simple, cheap, easy to prepare, and already exists in many kitchens. The third coffee that may help your insulin work better after 50 is coffee with cinnamon. This is one of the easiest upgrades you can make to your morning cup, but it is also one of the most misunderstood. A lot of people hear cinnamon is good for blood sugar and immediately start adding cinnamon to desserts, sweet drinks, oatmeal full of sugar, pastries, or coffee loaded with honey. That is not how this works. Cinnamon does not cancel sugar. Cinnamon does not erase bad choices. Cinnamon is not a magic powder that allows you to keep eating the same way and expect your insulin to suddenly become perfect. But when cinnamon is added to unsweetened coffee, it can become a very interesting combination. Because coffee brings chlorogenic acid, cinnamon brings natural compounds such as cinnamaldehyde and polyphenols, and together they may support glucose control through different pathways. Let me explain this simply. Insulin is the hormone that tells your cells to absorb glucose from the blood, but in insulin resistance, the cells stop listening clearly. It is almost like insulin is knocking on the door, but the cell does not open easily, so the pancreas produces more insulin. The body pushes harder, but the glucose still stays high. Cinnamon may help support the movement of glucose into cells by improving the way insulin signaling works, especially in muscle tissue. Coffee may help by supporting insulin sensitivity and reducing some glucose release from the liver. So when you combine both, you are not attacking the problem from only one side. You are supporting the body in two different ways, one from the coffee bean, one from the spice. And this is why coffee with cinnamon can be especially interesting for people after 50. Because after 50, insulin resistance is not usually caused by one single thing. It is usually a combination. Less muscle mass, more abdominal fat, more inflammation, poor sleep, stress, a liver that releases too much glucose, cells that do not respond well to insulin, and years of small habits that slowly accumulate. So the solution also usually comes from stacking small, better habits. Not one miracle, but many small metabolic improvements repeated every day. Coffee with cinnamon can be one of those small improvements. Now, how should you prepare it? The simplest way is to add cinnamon directly to your coffee after it is ready. Use about 1/4 to half a teaspoon at first. Some people like stronger flavor and can use a little more, but you do not need to exaggerate. Another option is to add cinnamon to the coffee grounds before brewing. This gives the coffee a smoother, more integrated flavor. You can also use a cinnamon stick in the cup or in the filter for a milder taste. But there are two warnings here. First, use pure cinnamon. Not cinnamon sugar, not cinnamon syrup, not cinnamon-flavored creamer, not a coffee shop cinnamon drink full of syrup and whipped cream. Pure cinnamon. Second, do not overdo it. More is not always better. Large amounts of some types of cinnamon, especially cassia cinnamon, may contain higher levels of coumarin, a compound that can be a concern for the liver when consumed excessively over time. So this is not about taking tablespoons of cinnamon every day. It is about using a reasonable amount as part of a smarter coffee habit. For many people, half a teaspoon in coffee is already enough to create flavor and support the habit. And here is the hidden advantage. Cinnamon can help reduce the need for sugar, because cinnamon creates a warm, slightly sweet perception, even though it is not sugar. When combined with coffee, it can make the cup feel richer and more satisfying. And that matters because many people are not addicted to coffee. They are addicted to sweet coffee. They do not want the bitterness. They want the sweetness, the creaminess, the comfort, the ritual. So if cinnamon helps you remove sugar from coffee, that alone can make a huge difference. Because the biggest insulin problem in most coffee routines is not caffeine. It is not the coffee bean. It is what people add to the cup. Sugar, sweetened condensed milk, caramel syrup, vanilla syrup, mocha sauce, sweet cream, flavored creamers. These things turn coffee into a glucose bomb. A person may say, "I only had coffee this morning." But that coffee may contain 30, 40, 50, or even 60 grams of sugar depending on how it was prepared. That is not a coffee, that is dessert with caffeine. So cinnamon helps in two ways. It may support insulin sensitivity through its own compounds, and it may help you enjoy coffee without sugar. That second benefit may be even more important in real life. Because if you can drink coffee without sugar every morning, you remove a repeated glucose spike from your day. And when you remove a repeated spike every day, your body has less insulin demand over time, less demand on the pancreas, less glucose swinging up and down, less craving later, less energy crash, less pressure on your metabolism. Now, there is another small improvement you can make. Add cinnamon with a few drops of pure vanilla extract, not vanilla syrup, not vanilla creamer, pure vanilla extract. This gives coffee a richer flavor and makes it feel naturally sweeter without actually adding sugar. For someone transitioning away from sweet coffee, this can be very helpful. So your third coffee is simple. Black coffee, preferably light or medium roast, with pure cinnamon. No sugar, no syrup, no sweetened creamer. This is one of the easiest insulin-friendly coffee habits to start after 50, but the fourth coffee is the most unusual one. It may not taste like your normal morning coffee, but it contains a concentrated form of the compound that makes coffee so interesting for blood sugar and insulin in the first place. And if your goal is to understand coffee and insulin, you need to know about it. The fourth coffee that may help your insulin work better after 50 is green coffee, or green coffee extract. This is the one most people do not think about when they hear the word coffee, because green coffee does not look or taste like the roasted coffee most people drink every morning. Green coffee comes from coffee beans before they are roasted, before the dark color, before the strong aroma, and before the familiar bitter flavor. And this matters because roasting changes the bean. Roasting creates the flavor people love, but it can also reduce some of the natural compounds that make coffee interesting for blood sugar and insulin, especially chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is one of the main compounds linked to coffee's metabolic benefits. It may help reduce glucose absorption, support insulin sensitivity, and help the liver release less glucose into the bloodstream. But when coffee beans are exposed to high heat for a long time, part of this compound can be lost. That is why dark roast coffee may taste stronger, but it is not always the strongest choice if your goal is insulin support. Green coffee keeps a much higher concentration of chlorogenic acid because it is not roasted in the same way. And for people after 50, this is important. As we age, insulin resistance can become more common. The body may need more insulin to do the same job. Blood sugar may stay elevated longer. The pancreas may have to work harder. And signs like belly fat, fatigue after meals, cravings, and high fasting glucose can begin to appear. So the goal is not just to lower sugar once. The goal is to help the body respond better to insulin every day. Green coffee may help because it is more concentrated in the compound that makes coffee useful for glucose metabolism. But there is one important warning. Green coffee extract is stronger than regular coffee. If you have diabetes, take blood sugar medication, have high blood pressure, kidney problems, liver problems, or heart issues, speak with your doctor before using concentrated extracts. This is not because green coffee is dangerous for everyone. It is because anything that may affect blood sugar should be used carefully when medication is involved. If green coffee extract feels too different or too strong, there is a simpler option. Choose light roast coffee. Light roast coffee is not the same as green coffee, but it usually preserves more chlorogenic acid than dark roast coffee. So if you want a practical daily habit, light roast black coffee is a much easier place to start. Now, before we finish, we need to talk about the part that can destroy everything. You can choose the best coffee in the world. You can drink light roast, decaf, coffee with cinnamon, or even green coffee. But if you add sugar, syrup, sweetened creamer, or condensed milk, you may cancel the benefit completely. The problem is usually not the coffee. It is what goes inside the cup. White sugar, brown sugar, honey, coconut sugar, maple syrup, agave syrup, flavored creamers, and coffee shop syrups can all raise blood sugar. And liquid sugar is especially harmful because it enters the bloodstream quickly. There is no fiber, no chewing, no protein, and nothing to slow it down. After 50, this matters even more because insulin resistance can make glucose stay high for longer. So what can you use instead? The first option is pure stevia. It can sweeten coffee without directly raising blood sugar, but always check the label. Avoid stevia products with maltodextrin or dextrose. The second option is erythritol. It tastes closer to sugar and usually has minimal impact on blood sugar for most people, but start with a small amount to see how your body reacts. The third option is cinnamon. It gives coffee a warm, naturally sweeter taste and may help you reduce or remove sugar. The fourth option is pure vanilla extract. Just a few drops can make coffee taste smoother and richer without using flavored syrup. The fifth option is unsweetened almond milk. It adds creaminess without the sugar load of sweetened creamers. So let's summarize the 4 coffees. The first is plain black coffee, especially light or medium roast, with no sugar. The second is decaffeinated coffee, ideal for people who feel anxious, shaky, sleepless, or notice higher glucose after regular coffee. The third is coffee with cinnamon, a simple upgrade that may support insulin sensitivity. and help replace sugar. The fourth is green coffee, or green coffee extract, the most concentrated option in chlorogenic acid, but one that should be used with more caution. And here is the most important message of this video. Coffee is not automatically bad for diabetes, but it is not automatically good either. Coffee becomes what you turn it into. If you drink it black, unsweetened, and prepared the right way, it may become a useful habit. But if your coffee contains sugar, syrup, sweetened creamer, condensed milk, caramel, or whipped cream, then you are not drinking coffee for insulin support. You are drinking dessert. So tomorrow morning, ask yourself, is this cup helping my insulin work better? Or is it forcing my body to produce more insulin just to handle what I added to it? That one question can change your routine, because many people do not need to give up coffee. They need to give up the sugar inside it. Now, comment below. How do you drink your coffee right now? Black, with sugar, with milk, with creamer, or with cinnamon? And if this video helped you, like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone over 50 who drinks coffee every day and wants better control of their health. I'm Dr. Michael Carter. And remember, after 50, the problem is not always the coffee. Many times, the real problem is what you put inside the cup.